And there is something, Danielle, that I learned in that particular experience that I carried with me until today, which is we see the world the way we are and not the way the world actually is. So when I was feeling alone, it was because I was seeing the world from my perspective and not necessarily allowing myself to see the world from the Colombian's perspective. Allowing yourself to adapt, as you were mentioning before, being open to the unknown, which is very uncomfortable, right? Because we are constantly looking for comfort. And stepping into the unknown is getting out of your comfort zone 100%.
You don't want to create a bubble, really, when you go and live abroad, which is, it might feel comfortable at the beginning, but then ultimately it turns into a cage rather than a bubble. So you have to be careful. But at the same time, you're playing with identity there, right?
Right. So in the beginning, I felt very lonely, but because I was not allowing myself to engage with others. I was in a very kind of a turning point moment, and then I got a job offer to come back to Brazil, coming back to my comfort zone.
Yes, absolutely.
But that was the turning point. And I realized that if I really want to live and build an international career, I would have to push myself out of the comfort zone.
So did you accept the job offer? I'm curious now. Did you accept the job offer?
No.
You didn't. Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of The Non-Native Leader, my video podcast series where we explore the lives, the stories, the adventures of people who were not born in an English-speaking country, but today they are working internationally, so they're using English for their work, for their life, for everything they are doing these days. And if you follow the series, we've spoken to people in fintech, IT, the arts, and movies, politics, so a different range of people. And today I'm really proud to have here with me Camila Ferreira. She is a true international person working across Latin America, USA, and Europe. As usual, I don't want to spoil it too much. So Camila, you're very welcome here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, and it's a pleasure. As I was hearing you, of course, there's many memories that come to life on how many countries I have lived, and I can't wait to kick off this conversation with you.
Fantastic. So let's start. First things first. So Camila, where are you from? Where are you based? And what do you do?
Yes, I'm originally from Brazil. That is where I was born and raised. Now I live in Miami, actually in the suburbs of Miami, but I have lived in a few other countries. I am a global business strategist. As you were saying, I've spent more than 20 years transforming, I would say, businesses across the globe. I've had the chance to work for multinational companies in Latin America, in Europe, and in the US as well. And nowadays, what I do is I advise companies and I advise leaders on how to transform or how to use experience as a growth engine.
Wow, that's interesting. I love it. So transformation is one of my favorite words, because transformation is deep. It can be, business, but not only business. It can be at a company level, at a personal level. And so it's always part of a journey, really. And, I'm talking about journeys, actually. I'm curious to explore your journey, because your journey is very international. You mentioned Brazil, you mentioned working with Latin America. I've seen you've worked with different countries there and Europe. And so you have transformed businesses all across the globe, we might say. Now, what has been for you the main challenge in your international experience?
Yeah, I would say culture, mostly because we take culture for granted. So once you think about your home country, and of course, I'm going to use the example of Brazil. It's kind of a natural for me to understand and interpret culture, such as what I normally say, right? when people don't say things, but their body language, in one country, it must be something or it must mean something, whereas in another country, it must have a completely different interpretation. When the tone that people use to speak, Brazilians and Latin Americans, we are louder, but it's completely different than in the US. So those are the things that to me is the most challenging parts of an international career or living abroad. And most of the times, and this is one of the mistakes I committed myself, is trying to leave your country in an international country or an international experience. And why? Because you were trying to force your home country culture into a completely different one. But you are a little kind of a sand in an ocean because you have to deal with that other culture. So this is to me is the most challenging part.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a fascinating aspect in a way because culture obviously changes. Sometimes it's enough to drive 1 hour and you find something completely different out there. And you need to adapt, obviously, because everywhere you go, especially like you, Camila, you're doing it for business, right? So adapting is a big part of it. And if you want to avoid embarrassment or if you want to avoid, I don't know, losing customers. So I suppose this is something you have to learn very early in an international journey. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you, I learned the hard way.
Oh,
In my first international opportunity was in Colombia. So as I said, I was born and raised in Brazil. A little over 10 years ago, I was invited to run a company in Colombia. And I knew the country from previous business trips. And to be honest with you, that's one of the countries that I would say gained my heart, if you will. I really like it. Colombia, I still do. But of course, that there is completely different experience of when you go for a few days, either for a business or for leisure, whatever, than living in the country, right? What happened was, first of all, it was my first international career. I did not have any mentor that could have to advise me on what to expect and what is the difference, what are the challenges that someone can face when moving abroad. I did have the dream of kicking off or having an international career, but I did not necessarily have the tools back then. So when I moved to Colombia, first of all, I was expecting the country to welcome me as it had been in the past as a tourist, and that was not the case. Then the other thing was definitely culture. I was a single woman moving internationally to lead an organization, so it's high, a very high senior or very senior leadership role. And of course, that there were other people, there were others in that particular organization looking for that position. So it was not against me, but what I was representing at that time. And that was very challenging to me because it was a shock of expectations, if you will. I was expecting the country to welcome me in a way, and it was completely different. Not because it was me, but because what I was representing. And then the other thing was I don't know, for the first months, I tried to leave Brazil inside of Colombia.
hmm.
So my connections was still in Brazil. I was still looking for Brazilian products, Brazilian restaurants, Brazilian community. And of course it helps. But I think that one of the most enriching experiences of living abroad is the ability or the opportunity to get to know a completely new culture. And once you do, you start to understand why people may either judge or may treat you in a certain way that is different than what you were expecting. If you do not allow yourself to embrace the unknown, then you will always judge them based on what? But based on what you do. And there is something,
Yeah.
Danielle, that I learned in that particular experience that I carried with me until today, which is we see the world the way we are and not the way the
Right.
world actually is. So when I was feeling alone, or when I was feeling isolated, it was because I was seeing the world from my perspective and not necessarily allowing myself to see the world from the Colombian's perspective. And by the time I kind of shifted that mindset, things changed completely and for the better, for sure. But I had to leave, not that I had to leave Brazil behind, but I have to place Brazil where Brazil is.
Yeah.
It will always be my home country. That is the country that I was born and raised, but it was no longer the place or the country that I was living in. And it makes a huge difference. So, allowing yourself to adapt, as you were mentioning before, being open to the unknown, which is very uncomfortable, right? Because we are constantly
Yeah.
looking for comfort. And stepping into the unknown is getting out of your comfort zone 100%. But that's the only way to me that you can learn that culture and you can expand your perspective of the world, which is very enriching.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely agree with you, Camila, here. I mean, it's you don't want to create a bubble really when you go and live abroad, which is it might feel comfortable at the beginning, but then ultimately it turns into a cage rather than a bubble. So you have to be careful. But at the same
Correct.
time, you're playing with identity there, right? Because the place where I mean, when you were born and raised, it's part of your identity. So things are shifting in a way. Identity becomes more colorful, becomes different in a way. So it might also be a painful exercise. For many people, it is actually, and for many people, it is a bit painful and it creates a bit of a shock. But ultimately, that's also the beauty of it, in my opinion, because you get to experiment, you get to experience different things. And, you know, there are negative and positive emotions there at play, I'm sure. And actually, yeah, talking about emotions, right? So you mentioned that first experience, Colombia, and feeling a bit. So, like, did you feel did you have negative emotions there at that stage, or was it more positive? How was it? I am curious.
Well, at the beginning, I can tell you it was more negative until I realized that I was creating those emotions based on the expectations I had set to myself. And this is so tricky and important, Danielle, because once again, it's how we deal with life. If you want to feel alone, even if you are surrounded by many people, and you decide that you are alone, you're going to be alone, right? So in the beginning, I felt very lonely, but because I was not allowing myself to engage with others. You know what I mean? And there is something that happened in that particular experience. I was in a very kind of a turning point moment, and then I got a job offer to come back to Brazil.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
And
So
how did it
yes,
feel?
it was it was so conflicting in my mind because at the same time I really wanted an international career. It unfolded completely different than what I have originally dreamed of or thought of or expected of. Again, it was completely different. But because I have kind of a shaped my dream in a way that was not allowing myself to live this in a different way. So things were going sideways. I was not kind of expanding my network. I was not having fun. I was very lonely. And then I got this job offer for a great company in Brazil, senior leadership role, all of the benefits, coming back to my comfort zone.
Yes, absolutely.
But that was the turning point. And I realized that if I really want to live and build an international career, I would have to push myself out of the comfort zone and moreover allow myself to see the world from a completely different perspective.
Yeah. So did you
So
accept the job offer? I'm curious now. Did you accept the job offer?
no,
You didn't.
but I
I knew,
almost did.
I knew you didn't.
Yes, and Danielle, it was so important to receive that job offer because once again, that was kind of at the checking points to me. It was like, hey, if you don't change, if you don't start allowing yourself to expand and engage and embrace a different culture, then that international career that you were looking for will never happen, not because of others, but because of you. So it was
definitely.
really important. It was a, as I said before, it was a checking point. I almost accepted because I think that I was kind of on on the verge of my energy,
Yeah.
and I almost said yes, but thankfully I had my 3 seconds of wisdom, and I said, you know what? Thank you very much for the opportunity, but moreover, thank you very much for the insight because that's exactly what I needed. And from that moment on, I completely changed how I engage with people, how I purposefully it grew my network, the events that I was attending, absolutely everything. And from that moment on, my life changed for the better. And
Wow.
again, I really want to highlight that it was not someone else's change. Nothing around me changed. It was me. The way I decided to show up, the way I decided to engage, the way I decided to embrace that culture. And I never left Brazil behind. But once again, I put Brazil where it belongs, which
Yeah.
was a home country. It will always be, and I'm very proud of being Brazilian. But that moment, I was living in Colombia, and it was unfair with them to bring Brazil into Colombia. Of course, that I need to bring to the table my assets of being Brazilian, because this will complement the culture or the country that I'm living in. But trying to push or try to force Brazil into another country is the biggest mistake that I was committing back then. So again, I think this is so relevant to your audience, people that are thinking of living abroad or going through the challenges of living abroad, because
Yeah.
it's not easy. It challenges you in all ways possible. But think
Yeah.
inside or think through how you are living that experience. I know many Brazilians here in the US, for example, that do not speak a word in English.
Hmm.
They decided to kind of
Yeah.
a limit or to leave that Brazilian bubble. And again, I'm not here to judge how people live their lives, but then they feel excluded. They feel that our Americans are cold. They feel that they do not have many opportunities. And that's when I always challenge, but how much effort are you putting into
Yeah.
making part of this community or being part of this
Yeah,
community?
once you're there, obviously, yeah, it makes sense to get to know it. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned language. Probably it's the first, the entry point, really, the language to get to know a culture.
The
And
language, the food. Oh, I don't like this
exactly,
food. Oh, I don't
you,
like the weather.
you gotta
Ah, it's
try
too
it. Yeah.
humid. It's too cold. It's too. So, first of all, before moving, making sure that you do a kind of a thorough review of the place you were going to, right?
Yeah.
To at least map the things that you may like or may not like. But once you are there, instead of focusing on or putting your energy on what is not necessarily the way you expected, shift that energy to be grateful to what you have conquered
Yeah.
or to what you have. And that's kind
Absolutely.
of the mindset shift that completely changed my experience in Colombia. And once again, nothing around me changed. It was me
It
who
was you.
decided to embrace this in a completely different perspective in mindset.
Absolutely, Camila. So that was your sliding doors moment, right? So you could have gone back to Brazil, but instead you decided to stay and to keep on to pursue, in a way, your international dream. And
Yes.
so you mentioned it's your career, your life, what you're doing today. Everything has changed for you after that particular decision there.
Yes.
So, so tell us then, Colombia then started looking in a completely different way to you,
Yes.
and then what happened after that? So,
Yes. And then when I was in love with Colombia, because again, I completely shifted my mindset. One of my best friends is from Colombia. I started kind of traveling and exploring and allowing myself to almost be a Colombian. Up to a point that even my Colombian accent, my Spanish accent was very Colombian. And
right,
up to a point that people start asking me if I was Colombian when I travel abroad across Latin America because of my Spanish accent was very Colombian. They start asking me if I was Colombian. I was like, wow, no, but thank you for the compliment because those are the signals that make you realize you are embedding yourself into the culture, right?
Yeah.
But when I was kind of living my dream life in Colombia, I got another job offer to move to Chile.
Right. So new country altogether.
Yes,
And
and you can.
this time, did you accept it?
I did.
Okay, okay, okay.
I was working for a tech company, and tech companies they change very quickly. They wanted me to move to Chile to create to centralize all of the operations for Latin America. And even though I tried to keep my position in Colombia or try to lead that project from Colombia, the rest of the team would be based in Chile, so there was no way I could stay in Colombia. And to be honest, I think that once I moved to Chile, I once again committed the same mistake. Um, because I was so much in love with Colombia that moving to a different place was hard to me. Like, oh my goodness, but now that I have my friends, now that I have my network, my community, and
No.
everything, why
Starting
uh,
all over again.
is starting all over again? But I thought it would be easier because they speak Spanish. Again, it was the same company. But to be
Mm.
honest, again, that's the trap, right? Because Chileans, they have a completely different culture compared to Colombians.
Yeah.
And I can see companies and businesses and leaders committing that mistake as well, thinking that expanding throughout Latin America is the same from country to country, and it's not.
No. Yeah.
And I remember, Daniel, that my first meetings in Chile, because they speak kind of a quite different Spanish in Chile, I was attending the meetings with like, I is it Spanish? What kind of Spanish? Because they use so many slangs or so many different words than the ones that I was used to. And once again, it's not about judging, it's different.
It is
It's like,
different, yeah.
but I cannot understand. And I was coming from a place where people were kind of almost seeing me as Colombian because of how I was behaving, how I was speaking. And all of a sudden I was once again in a situation where I was the kind of the outsider. And even the language, which is the first barrier that we face, that I thought wouldn't be a barrier because I was coming fresh from Colombia, I just assumed Chileans speak the same language or speaks the same way, and they do not.
Nope.
Okay. So once again, I have those kind of at least first weeks of, oh my goodness, I want to get back to Colombia. I love there. I already had my house, my friends, my everything. But then I said, do I really want an international career? What is my purpose? What do I want to accomplish? Will this enrich or help me in my in living my I would say long-term dreams?
Yeah.
Yes, right? And once again, that kind of a mindset shift happened faster than in Colombia for
Luckily.
sure. Yes. But once again, it's every time that we move, it's natural that we carry with us that comfort zone. It's
Yeah.
normal. It's human, right? But it's important that we also understand, and that's why I love working with customer experience because it's not about me, it's about others.
Yeah.
How could I help them, right? I was someone coming from outside, leading a transformational project that by itself creates a lot of discomfort and trying to impose my Colombian or my Brazilian way was not the best.
No, it
And
wouldn't
this wouldn't
work.
help build trust, build my community. So once again, I had to reinvent myself and expand the way I was seeing the world. So originally seeing the world from the Brazilian eyes, then from the Colombian eyes, and then that third experience was from Chile.
Yes.
how do they see the world? What is their story? What is behind their country, which is completely different than what I had lived in Colombia. So yeah, I'm not gonna say that I did not commit the same mistake again because I would be lying. However, I realized that faster, which is an
Yeah,
improvement.
absolutely. Yes. I mean, the more you do it, the better you become, of course, and the faster you learn. And I
Yeah,
also find
which
it fascinating, Camila, the fact that there are some surprises or unexpected ways that new culture challenge you. You mentioned language, right? So moving to a country, officially they speak the same language, and then you find that you also have work to do there. So you see, it's again, it's really fascinating because you don't expect it, but you get it, and then you again you need to adapt to a new reality. Same language used in a completely different way, and I don't know, that gives you something extra to work on for sure. But again, another fascinating, fantastic perspective on the local culture and how things can really be so different and so interesting, so colorful.
absolutely.
So,
And
yeah,
one kind of one another example is your service providers. Like for women, your hairstylist, your manicure, doctors, right?
yeah,
So the Colombian women, they are very well known for taking a lot of care of themselves, which is not the case for the Chilean women. So when I moved from Colombia to Chile, I was used to go to my hairstylist every week, do my manicure, and so because that's their culture, which was
sure.
completely different in Chile. And then I struggled to find a hairstylist because this is not part of their culture, so you don't have many out there. So
Yeah.
again, you just assume that you're gonna land and you're gonna look for referrals and you're gonna have the services, and that's not true. And moreover, even if you find the service provider, most likely they're gonna deliver the service different than what you're used to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it is different. It is challenging, but yeah, that's the beauty of it, in my
Oh my
opinion.
goodness, I love it. I love it. To be honest with you, I'm so grateful for not having coming back to Brazil.
Yeah,
This would have been the easiest and safest decision, but I wouldn't have learned what I did that completely transformed the way I see the world, the way I do business, the way I engage with people. And even now that I'm here in the US and I don't have plans to move internationally anytime soon, I keep pushing myself to expand my network virtually, getting to know
sure.
people from different cultures. I also have a podcast where I invite guests from all over the world for me to keep being challenged in how I see it. Of course, it's different than when you live in that particular country, when you have to deal with the culture on a daily basis. But I don't want to I don't want to I don't want to move away from this challenging of pushing myself to see the world from a different perspective absolutely every day.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Camila. Charlie, keep challenging yourself and virtually, but also in person. A quick question. What's your relationship with America, with the United States right now? Because you live there, you've been living there for a while. So how is it?
Yes, that's such a great question. And because I have lived in so many countries, people always ask me, what is your preferred country? And my answer is always like, it depends. Because throughout life, we change. Our priorities change. Today, I am married, I have a 6-year-old kid. So my priorities are good school, safety, a place where I can raise my kid in a good environment. So those are the things that are prioritized. Reason being, I live in the suburbs of Miami because here is very peaceful. I live literally in a community that is behind my kids' school. I can bike him or walk him to school every morning. This is what kind of brings me joy and peace of mind nowadays. But if you were asking me this question 5 years ago, my answer would be different.
Yes.
Maybe I'll not say five, but 6 years ago, where I was not a parent, I was living with my husband. Our priority was travel, reason why we decided to live in Europe, because we could experience, we could explore different cultures just by 1 hour by train.
Exactly.
You see? So my relationship with America is it brings me the infrastructure that addresses my current needs, which may not be the case in a few years from now.
Yeah.
But for example, when I think of Brazil, coming back to Brazil with the level of violence and uncertainty and political instability, those are the
Mm.
things that do not give me peace of mind at this moment. I
Yes.
don't know how I would deal with the challenge, the Brazilian challenge nowadays as a mom, which is completely different than when you were single, when you were married, right?
Oh, well, you
So
change perspective, of course. Yeah.
you change perspective. So that's how I deal with American. I don't believe there is any perfect place, but the best place for that moment of your life. And it's really important that you find which place is it. Because sometimes, again, you try to push yourself to be in a situation or in a country or in a location that it does not necessarily align with your expectations or with your needs and priorities. And it becomes a nightmare.
Yes. I mean, and going back to what you mentioned at the beginning, it's about you, about your mindset. So there isn't a perfect place. It's the best place for you in that particular moment of your life, I believe. So yes, it's all really it's an inner sort of interior process, right? And yeah, but perfection doesn't exist
Doesn't
really.
exist. No. And you must know yourself, right? So what
Yeah.
brings you joy? What are your kind of medium, long-term goals in life? Is it worth, does it align with your long-term goals? As I was saying about Colombia and about Chile and all the other countries, it was never easy. But all of those steps, all of those countries were very much aligned to my ultimate goal of creating an international and global career at the end of the day.
Yes.
So again, it was never easy, but it
Well,
was
it's
rewarding. When I look back, I'm very grateful for all the challenges, all the moments that I put myself in a situation where I was like, well, what do I do now? I had
yes.
to develop muscles and I had to reinvent myself in ways that I would never have done if I were in Brazil.
Absolutely, and that's the key, I believe. So, Camila, we are towards the end of our chat, and would you have any recommendation? I mean, we touched many topics, many ideas, but would you have like recommendations for people who want to have a great international experience like you?
Absolutely. So the very first thing is get to know what is your ultimate destination. If you really want an international career, we have more than 130 countries in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So, what better aligns with your expectations, right? So, weather to me had an impact, but to my husband was really worse. He hates winter. So, living in a kind of a very cold place was very depressing to him. And if it's the case for someone else, you got to take this into account, right?
Yeah.
So the very first thing is, what is your ultimate goal? Understand that living abroad is not living in Wonderland. You're going to face challenges that your home country will not teach you.
Yes.
There is no way. And why? Because you only learn those lessons once you were put outside of your comfort zone. So knowing your destination, understanding that you're not going to live in Wonderland, even though your family and friends, they will think that you were living in Wonderland and everything is beautiful and easy. It's not. And you're
Nope.
going to face challenges that you were not necessarily taught to. However, once again, I think that the beauty of living internationally is that what you're going to learn, there is no classroom that can teach you.
Yes, absolutely. So know your goal, know your objectives, know where you want to get to, and explore, get some information, and you can always try and then, move on if it's not working. So you'll always
Absolutely.
have the opportunity.
Yeah, we are
Right.
so connected nowadays. So if you go on LinkedIn or if you go in any social media, and as I said, I did not have a mentor back then, but I highly encourage people looking for moving internationally to connect with people who
Yes.
are already living there, not only from your home country. talk to immigrants in general.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
To collect feedback. But yeah, definitely, I think internet definitely helps us in establishing those connections for you to start shaping your own opinion. If you have the chance, visit the place before going. Never move during the winter. Winter make things harder, I would say. So that's one of my tips as well. And happy
Right.
to, if you have a kind of in your audience, people thinking of living abroad, I'm more than happy to connect and answer any question.
Absolutely, Camila. So thanks for shedding some light on Wonderland. That's what we all need, I think. So I would love to thank you for being my guest today. And if people, yeah, so you mentioned connecting with you. So if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here. This, as you could see, is a topic that I love. It's part of my life. If they want to connect with me, the best way is through LinkedIn. It's Camila Ferreira Global. That's the easiest way to find me, and I'm going to be more than happy to engage with them all.
Okay. Camila, thank you very much again for being here with me. And thanks everybody for watching, for listening, for being with us. I hope you enjoyed our chat. I certainly did enjoy it. And yeah, I have a new vision of Wonderland for sure after talking to Camila. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.